People Apart, the book by Chino Achebe, Chapter 6. It is read for you by Weirdo. The whole village turned out on the ilo. Men, women, and children. They stood around in a huge circle, leaving the center of the playground free. The elders and the grandees of the village sat on their own stools, brought there by their young sons or slaves. Okonkwo was among them. All others stood, except those who came early enough to secure places on the few stands, which had been built by placing smooth logs on forked pillars. The wrestlers were not there yet, and the drummers held the field. They too sat just in front of the huge circle of spectators, facing the elders. Behind them was the big and ancient silk cotton tree, which was sacred. Spirits of good children lived in that tree, waiting to be born. On ordinary days, young women who desired children came to visit under its shade. There were 7 drums, and they were arranged according to their sizes in a long wooden basket. 3 men beat them with sticks, working feverishly from one drum to another. They were possessed by the spirit of the drums. The young men who kept order on these occasions dashed about, consulting among themselves and with the leaders of the 2 wrestling teams, who were still outside the circle, behind the crowd. Once in a while, 2 young men carrying palm fronds ran around the circle and kept the crowd back by beating the ground in front of them. Or, if they were stubborn, their legs and feet. Eesh! At least the 2 teams danced into the circle and the crowd roared and clapped. The drums rose to a frenzy. The people surged forward. The young men who kept order flew around, waving their palm fronds. Old men nodded to the beat of the drums and remembered the days when they wrestled to its intoxicating rhythm. The contest began with boys of 15 or 16. There were only 3 such boys in each team. They were not the real wrestlers. They merely set the scene. Within a short time, the first 2 bouts were over. But the third created a big sensation, even among the elders who did not usually show their excitement so openly. It was as quick as the other 2, perhaps even quicker, but very few people have ever seen that kind of wrestling before. As soon as the 2 boys closed in, one of them did something which no one could describe because it had been as quick as a flash, and the other boy was flat on his back. The crowd roared and clapped and for a while drowned the frenzied drums. Okonkwo sprang to his feet and quickly sat down again. The 3 young men from the victorious boys' team ran forward, carried him shoulder high, and danced to the cheering crowd. Everybody soon knew who the boy was. His name was Maduka, the son of Obierika. The drummers stopped for a brief rest before the real matches. Their bodies shone with sweat, and they took up fans and began to fan themselves. They also drank water from small pots and ate cola nuts. They became ordinary human beings again, talking and laughing among themselves and with others who stood near them. The air, which had been stretched taut with excitement, relaxed again. It was as if water had been poured on the tightened skin of a drum. Many people looked around, perhaps for the first time, and saw those who stood or sat next to them. "Oh, I didn't know it was you," Ekwefi said to the woman who had stood shoulder to shoulder with her since the beginning of the matches. "I do not blame you," said the woman. "I have never seen such a large crowd of people. Is it true that Okonkwo nearly killed you with his gun?" "It is true, indeed, my friend. I cannot yet find a mouth with which to tell the story." "Your chi is very much awake, my friend. And how is my daughter Ezima?" "She has been very well for some time now. Perhaps she has come to stay." "I think she has. How old is she now?" "She's about 10 years old." "I think she will stay. They usually stay if they do not die before the age of 6. "I pray she stays," says Ekwefi, with a heavy sigh. The woman with whom she talked was called Chelo. She was the priestess of Akbala, the oracle of the hills and the caves. In ordinary life, Chelo was a widow with 2 children. She was very friendly with Ekwefi, and they shared a common shed in the market. She was particularly fond of Ekwefi's only daughter, Ezima, whom she called my daughter. Quite often, she bought bean cakes and gave Ekwefi some to take home to Ezima. Anyone seeing Chelo in ordinary life would hardly believe she was the same person who prophesied when the spirit of Fakbala was upon her. The drummers took up their sticks, and the air shivered and grew tense like a tightened bow. The two teams were ranged, facing each other across the clear space. A young man from one team danced across the center to the other side and pointed at whomever he wanted to fight. They danced back to the center together and then closed in. There were 12 men on each side, and the challenge went from one side to the other. Two judges walked around the wrestlers, and when they thought they were equally matched, stopped them. 5 matches ended in this way. But the really exciting moments were when a man was thrown. The huge voice of the crowd then rose to the sky, and in every direction. It was even heard in the surrounding villages. The last match was between the leaders of the teams. They were among the best wrestlers in all the 9 villages. The crowd wondered who would throw the others this year. Some said Okafo was the better man. Others said he was not the equal of Ikezue. Last year, neither of them had thrown the other, even though judges had allowed the contest to go on longer than was the custom. They had the same style, and one saw the other's plans beforehand. It might happen again this year. Dusk was already approaching when their contest began. The drums went mad, and the crowds also. They surged forwards as the 2 young men danced into the circle. The palm fronds were helpless in keeping them aback. Ikezue held out his right hand. Okafo seized it, and it closed in. It was a fierce contest. Ikezue strove to dig in his right heel behind Okafo, so as to pitch him backwards in a clever Ege style. But the one knew what the other was thinking. The crowd had surrounded and swallowed up the drummers, whose frantic rhythm was no longer a mere disembodied sound, but the very heartbeat of the people. The wrestlers were now almost still in each other's grip. The muscles on their arms and their thighs and on their backs stood out and twitched. It looked like an equal match. The 2 judges were already moving forward to separate them when Ikezue, now desperate, went down quickly on one knee in an attempt to fling his man backward over his head. It was a sad miscalculation. Quick as the lightning of Amadiora, Okafo raised his right leg and swung it over his rival's head. The crowd burst into a thunderous roar. Okafo was swept off his feet by his supporters and carried home shoulder high. They sang his praise, and the young women clapped their hands. Who will wrestle for our village? Okafo will wrestle for our village. Has he thrown 100 men? He has thrown 400 men. Has he thrown 100 cats? He has thrown 400 cats. And send him word to fight for us. This is the end of chapter 6 of the book. Thanks for my part. Achino Cheve, read for you by Weirdo. Thank you.